We're gonna make this really cool geometry nodes split tutorial, and it's super easy and it takes no time at all, and it can make your renders really stand out. So the first thing that I have here is I've got a Raven model that I just picked up from Sketchfab. It's super nice and super simple. I'll link it in the description, but yeah, geometry nodes that we have already set up, and start working. Oh, and I've got a bonus tip at the end, so make sure you watch all the way through. So starting off, we've got our geometry nodes. We're gonna add a new one, put it in there, and the very first thing we're gonna do is we're going to shift and add an empty. Now this empty is going to act as our driver for the whole effect. And you can put it right here so that the bottom of the empty kind of matches the middle of the Raven right into the geometry nodes for the Raven. Now with that in there, we're going to add in a delete geometry node, and everything will disappear, but it's totally fine. A compare node, less than node, add in our location and scale. Now we still don't have our bird, and that's because we have to add in a vector math node set to distance. We want to change this integer, if yours is on integer, to vector, no, float. We want to change it to float. Okay. Keep that scale in there. For this distance node is position. All right. Now we've changed the object info to relative, and this is what we got. So you can see that the empty that we put in our geometry nodes for the Raven is actually acting on it as the driver, like we said, and it's working perfectly fine, and it's doing its job. It looks totally great, and we only have a few nodes that we're already working with, so no problem there. Now we're gonna spice this up a little bit by adding in a set position node. And the set position is going to do a few fun things to the edges. So you want your distance, if you pull out the distance and then plug that into the offset with your map range, it'll look a little bit wonky, but if you duplicate your distance node, put it between the map range and the set position, and change it to multiply, you still don't have anything because it's not plugged in. But if you tell it to only act on the normals or act in the normal direction, it explodes, which again, is not what we were hoping for. So let's change that up. Plug in the object info to scale minimum and maximum for the map range. Use an add node, and voila. Maybe. Change the subtract down. And duplicate this. Put it in between the vector math, set to multiply, and that decreases the amount in which it's doing this sort of explodey thing. And then we're going to come in here and we are going to tinker around with it, put an add node between the scale factor of the object and the map range. And what that's done is it's created this sort of nice edge position to change that level. So yeah, it looks nice, but there's just a few more things we can do with this. We're going to add a split edges node, and because this model is a scan, it looks like the edges are already split, but that's totally fine. We're still going to add that split edges node just in case in the future you want to add this effect to something that's not this raven. And then the last thing that we want to do is we're actually going to mix in some noise. So once again, it's going to kind of disappear for just a second. But if you put a mix node with a noise texture on the end over here, pipe the position into the vector of that noise, and then change the mix node to linear light, you have this. And so what's happening is, once again, the edge is being displaced, and it's being displaced by this noise factor position. Now, you can alter this to be a little less crazy or a little bit more. I like it to be a little bit more, and when you start playing with this empty here, it still kind of creates like a noise effect that's following along the empty, which is totally fine. But it looks nice, so you don't have to tinker with it too much, which is pretty cool. And again, if you didn't catch that earlier, the edge of the effect that's happening is driven by this add node. So if you change it to 0.2, it makes it a little larger. If you change it to 0.05, it makes it a little smaller. So it's just up to your preference. There are two more things I want to do with this to kind of give it that nice effect that we started with. So I'm going to move the empty right here, and I'm actually going to duplicate this raven. Okay, we've got it duplicated, and then this is an important part here because it won't work, and it's been I've been frustrated many times because I skipped this step. Duplicate the geometry nodes on the duplicated raven or object or whatever it is that you're working with. Okay? All right, I warned you. All we're gonna do here is we're going to change the less than to greater than and the add to subtract. And then bang. It's perfectly lining up with the other object that you have displacing, and as you move the empty, it displaces both of them for that really nice sort of reveal effect. Now, I'm not too crazy about how the edge is looking on the second one here, so I'm actually going to change it down to 0.1, maybe even 0.2. And the really nice thing about this is it didn't affect the area. So it's still lined up, is what I'm trying to say. It's still lined up perfectly with the other object, the other raven. But say I wanted to come back here and add more noise to it. Now it's not lined up perfectly. So I have to go back into the other geometry nodes for the other raven and change that noise to the proportions for the other raven. One cool thing that I also did here is I went into the shader editor and I just changed up the color of the raven. So we've got the first raven, which is this, and this is the second raven. So what we want to do is we want to duplicate this material, and all I'm going to do is add in a color ramp, and that just grays it out. That's it. I might bring the black value up a little bit. And so what that kind of does is it changes, or it looks like the raven is changing from its natural sort of purple feather look to this darker raven effect. Now, because I just put in a color ramp, it's going to color everything dark or black and white. So maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to add a little bit more. There's certainly a ton more that you could do with these materials, but for what I'm doing right now, it's totally fine. And then the one last thing that I did, which I thought added just a little bit more to this, was I added in a solidify modifier. Now I have this turned off because it can make your computer pretty heavy, and it makes this effect really slow everything down, but it looks really nice when you get in there. Now I tried to bevel this too, and maybe you could do something in geometry nodes, but I haven't been able to successfully do it. And now that I'm close in here, I'm actually going to go back into geometry nodes and change this layer to 1.1. And because the solidifies on, it's not gonna like that, but there we are. So that's the effect. Environment itself is really simple. These are just some spotlights that I put on the raven. The world is set to 0.2 with a color that's just really bright, maxed out. And then I have another simple spotlight over here. So this is a really simple lighting setup, but it still adds that dramatic sort of tonality. And then it also has a really cool soft light that's kind of just like in the background. And then of course I have like this overhead light which is an additional light that creates sort of like more fill. And then these two are just images that I found, I believe, online. Yeah, brown planks. I think that's from Polyhaven. So if that's what you're looking for, that's where I got those. Bonus tip, make your renders really cinematic, is to slow everything down. So be more epic, or I want it to have more impact. One way to do that is to just slow down how fast your effect is going. So what I've done here is I've added just a little bit more detail in the noise and kind of cranked everything down, sort of like a cinematic title sequence or something like that. And all I'm doing here is I've animated the empty that's driving this guy from start to finish very slowly. And what I'm doing with the cameras is I'm making them go from different positions on the raven. So at first we kind of have like this really nice zoomed out piece, but you can't see the full model. And then on the second shot, we're totally zoomed in, we're really tight, and in our camera settings, we're actually at 85 focal length. So you really get this nice full view of the raven. And then for our third shot, we're coming in here even tighter, and we're seeing this really cool up close claw shot. So if we were to come out of, let's see, yeah, it won't play for me right now, but I'll include the cinematic in there. And then for the fourth shot, we're coming out, full view, reveal the object that we've been waiting to see, and it's the Raven. So that was my bonus tip. Make things cinematic super easily by slowing down the effect and just adding a little bit of detail, and just those two things go a really long way. If you are interested in more videos like this, please consider liking and subscribing, and comment down below what you want me to do next, and have a great day. Thank you.